Welcome, welcome. Welcome to part four of spiritual intelligence. Go ahead and hit like and share this live stream with someone in your network. Let them know that we're here. This is the fourth and final session of spiritual intelligence. It's Saturday afternoon here on the East Coast where I'm at. We're a little late getting started today, but I spent a lot of time in contemplation and just reflecting over the last 3 weeks and wanting to just end this seminar in a way that brought together all that we talked about, and also you were able to feel and experience the embodiedness of this concept of spiritual intelligence. I'll share before we close what our next seminar will be about. But go ahead and just let's breathe into this lesson. Some deep breaths. I don't know how your day has been so far. But let's just relax in this moment. And let whatever it is just pass over you. It's a beautiful fall day here. The weather's been a little on the chilly side this week, but beautiful. I hope it's likewise where you are. Okay, y'all there? You got your afternoon beverage? Hopefully you had your lunch. Or you can bring it into the seminar with you. Get comfortable, relax, and let's get ready as the journey begins. I'm Reverend Lady Mother Saundra Addison-Britto, aka Professor Saundra Addison-Britto, and we are concluding the four-part series, a seminar that we started on September the 26th, and for the last previous 3 weeks we have delved deep, both feet in, as we try to unpack and discuss this idea of spiritual intelligence. For some of you, this was a new concept, a new idea, or it was a new way of thinking about old ideas. I want to just thank y'all that has stayed with us these 3 weeks and today, whether you were with me live or you joined and watched later. I want to invite you to just share a comment or question or response. Tell me how you have experienced these lessons, these seminars, and perhaps even share your own experience of walking this journey and tapping into your spiritual intelligence. You can reach me you can leave a comment on YouTube. You can drop a comment in the comment section on YouTube and share whatever your thoughts are. You can share, oh, this is a bunch of hogwash. I never heard this before. I think you're nuts. Or that it has deeply touched you and challenged you to think about yourself in a much deeper way. Appreciate all your feedback, whatever it is. Or you can email me at triumphlifecenter@gmail.com. Again, that's triumphlifecenter@gmail.com. Okay, so again, welcome to today's concluding seminar in this 4-part series. We have been dealing with first, what is spiritual intelligence? Why is spiritual intelligence important to know about? How to access spiritual intelligence and how to use it. That's the focus of today's lesson. Over the past 3 weeks, we introduced the concept of spiritual intelligence. But before that, we even introduced the idea of what is intelligence. And we discussed 3 types of intelligence. We said IQ, intellectual quotient, EQ, emotional quotient, and finally SQ, spiritual intelligence. We hit briefly last week on AI, artificial intelligence, but this is not what this series is about. IQ and EQ, intellectual and emotional intelligence, are the most understood methods of intelligence, at least in our current worldview, in a Western context. They both facilitate knowledge, comprehension, and communication. So how do we know what we know? How do we process that? And then how do we communicate with others? Spiritual intelligence, on the other hand, although not commonly understood as the other 2 are, but they too facilitate knowledge, comprehension, and communication. I would say spiritual intelligence does it in the most basic and natural way. The other 2 we have to learn. Spiritual intelligence, we forget. So we have to relearn or reactivate it within ourselves. In the lesson today, or in the previous lessons, I shared, just as a foundation for this whole study, The definition of spirit, which I shared a definition with you, the essence of life that is embodied in every living being, but not limited to this material world. I also encouraged you to come up with your own definition because I shared I don't particularly like definitions, but they are useful, at least in a teaching context like this. Whether you are a religious or non-religious person, you may find the definition I shared with you to be useful in understanding how to tap into your spiritual intelligence. All intelligence, I also shared, has two things in common. Two things. For those that have been with me for the 3 weeks, the two things are what? Ontology and epistemology. Ontology being about the nature of being, spirit versus matter in our materialistic world, the nature of reality or the scientific, from the scientific view, is matter. From this context, the nature of being is spirit, not matter. Epistemology, the nature or the grounds of knowledge, is the realm of spirit again versus matter. Or we do base our knowledge on the material world alone, that substance which is devised from matter, or is there something else that is intangible, that is really the basis for our knowledge? So that's where we laid the foundation. Spirit, therefore, is the foundation underlying the causation at the root of being and at the root of truth. So the nature of all being, spirit lies as its foundation. And if we're seeking truth, spirit lies as a foundation of truth. We talked about last week the science of the soul. We should take a moment to pause and breathe. We said breathing was an important part of this whole process of studying because it is in the breath that we have life. And another word for breath in the Hebrew tradition is ruach, which is spirit. And so when we understand the breath, we pay attention to the breath because it is spirit, it is life. So we talked about science of the soul and the spiritual dimension of intelligence. The science of the soul as being the spiritual dimension of intelligence. And so we had to give you an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about soul. So there are many definitions of soul, and I'm sure you may have one. We use that word widely in our culture. But I prefer a definition put forth by Michael Lerner in his book, Spirit Matters. And he says there that soul is the personal manifestation of spirit in our own being. Think about that for a moment. Soul is the personal manifestation of spirit in our own being. Over the last 2 weeks, I discussed also the concept of personhood as a theological, philosophical, as well as a legal concept. The idea of personhood is important, I shared, to this study because it undergirds the concept in our Western worldview of the nature of being and reality. How do we understand reality? And what is our understanding of the nature of being? This is where the idea of personhood becomes important. What does it mean to be a person or to have personhood? What is at play here is our understanding of the soul in the concept of personhood. So connecting those two, what does one have to do with the other? Thing to consider is this. Some have theorized that personhood, as I shared with you, I think last week, uh, is not based on having a body. The physicality of one's being does not then qualify or is not essential or necessary or sufficient for one to be considered a person. But a soul is what is required for personhood. You can trace this in some ways back to scripture within the Judeo Christian tradition. In the book of Genesis, when the creation story shares that God created Adam from the earth, formed him out of the dust of the earth, and then God breathed ruach, the breath, spirit, into Adam. And Adam what? Became a living soul. The body was at play, but what gave the body personhood was the soul when it came alive. Just a little bit more I want to add or share on this idea of this concept of personhood before we get into today's lesson, because I think it's important. So, one, personhood is a theoretical framework that undergirds everyone's worldview. You probably have not thought about this intentionally or pragmatically, but I want you to back into it. I want you to consider, what is your idea of personhood? What makes a body a person? Theories of personhood defines aspects of the human condition that whatever theory you have chooses to honor. And so there are many aspects of the human condition that we have in common perhaps with the animal kingdom, the greater animal kingdom. What of those aspects do you choose to value? Do you choose to consider? Do you choose to enfold in your idea of personhood? So let me give you just some historical background. The 1787 in the U.S., the 1787 Constitutional Convention is where the Three-Fifths Compromise came about. And you may have heard of this. I'm sure you're somewhere you have heard about this idea of Three-Fifths Compromise. This was an agreement reached that allowed for each state's slave population to be counted as 3/5 of a person. And this was for the purposes of granting them representation, granting the state expanded representation in Congress, in the electoral college, I'm sorry. So those that were enslaved persons did not have full personhood. They were valued at 3/5 of a person. Stay with me. Later, in 1857, in the Dred Scott case, and you may also be familiar with that, Chief Justice Roger Taney, who wrote the majority opinion, who ruled against Dred Scott, wrote that Dred Scott was not a person at all. He wasn't even 3/5 a person. He completely annihilated Dred Scott, this enslaved person who was suing for his freedom, that he didn't have personhood at all, that he was property to be bought and sold and inherited, property that was transferable and that could become a part of someone's estate. Just in another context, in 1886, in a case known as Santa Clara County versus the Southern Pacific Railroad, the Supreme Court granted corporations, I want you to hear this, the same rights as an individual, using the 14th Amendment to validate that. So today, and there's been other cases that have come down since then. But currently, corporate personhood is a legal concept that corporations are separate legal entities that have some of the same rights and responsibilities as individuals. hmm So, in the United States and in other parts of the world, depending on where you're at, a corporation, not a person, is considered to have personhood under the law. And then finally, under this idea of personhood, sexual personhood is another area that is an application of a larger theory of personhood that shaped Western philosophy and laws about marriage, sexual relationships, about immorality, and encoded these ideas in the laws. In our next series, which will be available after the holidays, we will discuss what it means to be a human being. That's what I plan to do the next seminar on. And we'll look at this idea through the lens of theology, philosophy, and the legal concept of personhood. So look for that. But I thought it was important to just share this as a part of this lesson to help, again, lay a broad, solid foundation for understanding what we're talking about in terms of spiritual intelligence. We also talked about last week about how one accesses or activates their spirituality or their spiritual intelligence. I introduced 4 ways of doing this. And the first 3 I shared with you last week, which are 2 of them are forms of meditation. In fact, they all could be thought of as forms of meditation, but more clearly understood, the first 2 are forms of meditation. 1, meditation that utilizes the breath and seeks to quiet the mind and observe patterns of thought. 2, meditation that also uses the breath and seeks to quiet the mind, but more importantly, to bring into harmony emotional energy, and to, in terms of patterns of feeling, how one feels. The next one, which I introduced, which a lot of folks do or utilize, or you don't often think of it as a form of meditation, but it is. And that simply is presence. Presence. And when I speak of presence here, what I'm speaking about is our being present in nature, being present with the earth, and allowing that presence to form and inform and transform our relationships. The 4th one, which I didn't share last week, and that is the heart of what we're talking about as we conclude this series today, is transcendence. Transcendence. And transcendence is a process of spirit. It is a portal between breath. Is a portal of breath between mind, which are our thoughts, and emotions, which are our feelings. So let me just share that again. Transcendence is a space where we enter into spirit, and that space is the portal. The gateway to that is between mind and emotions, between the breath, the inhale and the exhale. What this does essentially is it breaks us free from being spellbound, allowing us to access knowledge and one's potential power. Also, it's a holistic intelligence, and it integrates our intellect and emotions and manifest the soul as a synchronistic being in harmony. That's an inner harmony with oneself first. All harmony springs from within. There's no harmony out there if you don't have harmony in here. You are spellbound if you are existing in what appears to be harmony outside of yourself and you're fragmented, torn, and all over the place on the inside. So it's about being in harmony within oneself, then with others, in the universe. So in today's final seminar or lecture, we want to explore how do you use spiritual intelligence? How do you use the spiritual intelligence to break the power of the spell over your life? I know some of you are still sitting with and trying to comprehend this idea that I introduced of the spell. And you're like, no, I ain't got no spell over my life. What are you talking about? That sounds like witchcraft or voodoo or something else. Yeah, I'm sure it does. Part of believing that is to be blinded by the spell so that we don't see how in our everyday occurrence, in our everyday participation in this earth realm, we are operating under a spell. Using your spiritual intelligence, you gain access to the portal of truth, the place where all knowing exists. Not fragmented, not just facts or what's been produced or marketed for you to believe and to take in as being truthful. But it gives you access to what is real and what is truth. And I would just share that, although it is not widely understood, our spiritual intelligence is our most basic and natural way of knowing. That is how we come here, equipped to know. It's through our spiritual intelligence. I talked earlier about meditation. As I shared with you, meditation is one way of accessing spiritual intelligence, and it may be an effective way for many, thousands, millions. It's been used since history is recorded and prehistory. There's evidence. So meditation is a time-proven way that humans use to quiet their mind, channel the emotions, and go beyond this natural realm. For me, meditation as a practice to quiet the mind and drawing on the masculine energy and spirit, because I talked about that last week, came later in life. A meditation that's really focused on mindfulness training or quieting the mind, stilling one's mind and thoughts, paying attention to one's thoughts. That really came for me later in life, maybe about 30 plus years ago, 30, a little more, give or take, years ago. And it has been useful in helping me to navigate the landmines of my mind and emotions. So I did find it to be, and continue to be, useful. I encourage you to use meditation, both guided and self-directed, to quiet your mind. It will help you to see more clearly, and more importantly, it will help bring clarity to what you are feeling. This form of meditation, from a spiritual perspective, however, as I shared, draws on the masculine energy in spirit. I'm not saying it's male or it's female. I'm saying it draws on the masculine energy of spirit. Spirit encompasses both masculine and feminine energy. And this kind of meditation draws on the masculine side of spirit. And it uses that to guide, align, and focus one's thoughts and emotions. On the other hand, meditation, which uses contemplation and forms of creativity, can also have the same outcome for a practitioner. Personally, I have used this form of meditation since childhood. Didn't know to articulate it as such. As I shared, spiritual intelligence is our basic way of knowing. It's very natural to us. So from childhood, this way of using contemplation and forms of creativity was very useful for me in childhood. One example I'll share with you is that, and some of you may relate, I learned to sew very early in life. Um, I learned by watching my sister and my mother. And I learned not because someone forced it on me, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was fascinated by how you could take a piece of cloth and transform that into something beautiful, something useful. Whether it was my mother and my older sister making patchwork quilts from old scraps of material, or my sister sewing drapes for our home or for someone else, or making our clothes that we wore. I was fascinated by how that happened. And so I learned to sew early in life, and sewing for me was a form of meditation. It was a means of expression that allowed me to channel my thoughts and emotions through my body in a way that harmonized my feeling and thoughts, resulting in a sense of bliss. There was something beyond words that I could not express, that I felt, that I sensed, that I knew as I sewed. And it was as if the world was shut out. It was only me, the sewing machine, the needle and thread, and the cloth. The ability to process one's emotions or your feelings, or what you are feeling, I should say, even when you cannot articulate what it is a profound form of meditation. I want you to stop a moment and breathe on that. The ability to process one's emotions, what you are feeling, even when you cannot articulate that through language, is a profound form of meditation. Why? Because it moves you from the spell. It momentarily breaks the spell. And it takes you to the realm where human language does not exist. It opens up that part in you that puts you back in that space of pure spirit. For me, it allows my emotions to say, run their course through my body. Because you have to release it through your body. My body, releasing the feelings associated with those emotions and allowing them to dissipate. This has been a very powerful tool for me in navigating through complex relationships, both in my personal life, in my professional life, in my private life, and my public life. Meditation in all forms, I would offer, seeks to break you free from the spell of this life. That's the power of meditation. But it is not done without struggle. The idea is to move through to that space where meditation becomes second nature, or the process becomes second nature, which then provides a smoother transition into the spirit realm. For others, though, this form of meditation may be expressed through the process of, you're familiar with sewing. For someone else, it may be creating a painting, or writing music, playing an instrument. It may be in restoring an old automobile to its original glory, or cooking a meal. It is the engagement of one's body in the creative process that allows you to drift away from this material realm, although you're handling material things, but that process allows you to delve into a space that will open that portal back to spirit. This form of meditation, I would suggest to you, draws on feminine energy to guide, align, and focus one's thoughts and emotions. Very powerful. Very powerful. And I'm sure many of you have experiences that you could share. You may not have thought about it in the past, but when you think about it, you say, oh yeah, I remember getting caught up when I was doing this or that. Gardening, maybe. You know, planting flowers or vegetables. And you had that experience of that opening where you entered into space that was void of time and space. Both forms of meditation, when done effectively, lead to a shift in how one feels about what they know, who they are, and the world around them. Feelings are impacted in whatever the form of meditation. It is also important to note that both forms of meditation that I just discussed can lead one to be mesmerized. And another word for that is to be spellbound. Let's breathe for a moment. Breathing and paying attention to the breath is so important. It's the practice of this that eventually leads us to that portal being an open door where we can easily go in and out of that knowing, that experience of spirit. Unlike IQ or EQ, where you can use tools and other available techniques to enhance and further develop your ability to comprehend and gain knowledge, as well as gaining control of your emotions to becoming a more sociably engaged individual, spiritual intelligence cannot be taught in that sense. It can only be experienced. This is the paradoxical element of this teaching even. I've been attempting to teach you about spiritual intelligence, yet spiritual intelligence in its essence cannot be taught. Let me give you an example of what I mean. So, can you teach someone how to see something? Can you? Can you teach someone how to see something? You can guide their gaze. I can say, oh, look at the candle. But to look at something or stare at something and seeing it, which involves perception, are not the same things. I can't teach someone how to see. These last 3 weeks and today have been about directing the attention of the listener, you the listener, to look and stare and gaze and to bring into focus for yourself the idea that is natural to yourself. It's not foreign to you. And that idea perhaps has been forgotten, cast under the spell of this worldview, or what it means to be a person and how one attains knowledge. My purpose here, therefore, has been to make you aware of the spell. Yeah, to make you aware of the spell and to urge you to break the spell. You have the tools. You have the access. You can activate the tools you have to break the spell. As I bring this series to a close, let me do some sharing of my own experience, personal history of accessing spiritual intelligence to break the spell in my own life. I cannot tell you exactly when I started accessing spiritual intelligence. But for me, it has been like weaving in and out. Weaving in and out. I will share this, though. My first conscious memory that has never left me was when I was, from when I was an embodied spirit being, because I, at that time, had not yet come into the knowledge of personhood or what it meant to be a person or a human being. But I was somewhere between 6 months old and 9 months old that I had been living in this earth realm. The experience was exhilarating. For me, there was a sense of wonder and an awareness of self as separate, yet connected to everyone and everything around me. I saw things that wasn't me. I didn't have the words for what me meant, but I saw that. And I saw me. I observed me, and I observed them, and I observed nature. The feeling is what remains, and that feeling is most profound. That feeling at the time, and even now, interpreting that with words is limited because I was pre-human language at that time. I didn't know language. I didn't understand language. I didn't have language. But the feeling, the only word I could use now to describe that would be blissful. It was blissful. We can breathe there for a moment. Perhaps you've had moments in your life when you felt that. Beyond expression. We used to sing a song in Triumph. We rewrote the words to a familiar hymn. And the hymn was Jesus Keep Me Near the Cross. And I love that hymn today. We changed the words to fit our theology and doctrine. But there was one line in the revision of Triumph that said, it talked about joy beyond expression. joy beyond expression. I want you to feel that. That means that there are no words, there are no thoughts, there are no ideas. It's all in the realm of spirit or feeling. Joy beyond expression. Powerful. The process of being humanized is what I call the process of becoming spellbound. There is a forgetting, or perhaps better stated, a letting go that occurs with the integration of human language into the embodied spirit. This letting go brings about a reinterpreting of the nature of being and how one receives and listens, transmutes knowledge, which ultimately shapes one's sensoriality, one's place in the scheme of reality. How and why this process develops differently based on the individual is not entirely clear to me. I'll share that. But what that it happens is not in dispute. It happens to everyone. I want to share a little bit more of my own personal experience, but only to a limited degree, and I'll tell you why. There's a temptation to emulate another's experience. There's a very strong temptation in our human experience to simulate into one's consciousness the experience of another that one has heard. And sometimes this is done unintentionally. It's not an intentional taking on or someone else or living vicariously through someone else. It's just the way the energy of mind works. But for those who understand the power of magic, which we all have, we may use it intentionally or we may not use it at all intentionally, but we are using it. But when you understand the power of it, you understand and you are careful to guard your words. Yes. You're careful what comes out of your mouth. It's not just sound bites. It's not just stringing together letters and sounds and to articulate or reiterate or give a different iteration of a thought or an idea. But words cast spells. Yes. Words cast spells. In my experience of spiritual intelligence, it has been somewhat like, as I shared, weaving in and out of being under the spell. And I think that's a truer sense of being awakened. Is the reality that you fall asleep at times. It's like one said, the kind of true test of whether you are mentally sound or not is acknowledging that sometimes I feel like a nut and sometimes I don't. Sometimes you have to acknowledge that you're walking on the edge. Yes. Sometimes I may be close to the edge. And other times I got full reign on my mind. Other times not so much. And I think this idea of being enlightened challenges us to recognize that sometimes I'm awake and sometimes I fall back asleep. Sometimes I step out from under the spell and sometimes the spell has its hold on me. For myself, I never fully lost my awareness of spirit from my birth. I never went back to sleep to the extent that I've forgotten I was spirit. Never. But throughout my life, I lived in and out, as I said, this state of being actively aware and utilizing spirit and other times and the power that spirit grants us, and at other times just living under the spell, just living under the spell, succumbing to it. There have been times when I entered the portal of spirit unprovoked, meaning it wasn't initiated because I was in some kind of meditation or engaged in some spiritual practice or contemplating, unprovoked. And it was simply transcendence. The tool that I shared is the fourth tool way of accessing spiritual intelligence. Transcendence. For me, these experiences, which have happened throughout my life, they found me at times sitting in the classroom as a young child, as a teenager, while walking down the street, while sitting in church, Pentecostal service, while standing in a courtroom for a legal matter, or in my kitchen washing dishes, or lying in my bed alone. Transcendence. It could happen anywhere, at any time, unprovoked. For me, these experiences have been the gateway into the realm where time and space do not exist. There's no words to articulate it. It is a feeling, it is a knowing, it is an experience. Being in the fullness of what it means to be. An awareness in the fullest sense was like that first time for me, in that blissful moment as a baby, experiencing the bliss. A knowing that is perception, not gazing, not looking, and not just seeing, but knowing. That gnosis, that knowing that's an engagement, an exchange, a changing of your being. There's no way to have these kinds of experiences and remain the same in one's worldview and soul. There's no way for this to happen and you remain the same. You too, yes you, I'm sure have had similar experiences. There's nothing special about someone that has these kinds of experiences. Sometimes you have them and you ignore them. Yet it changes you. What is important to understand that this kind of experience in its fullness is a transcendence. You are transcending, you're elevating yourself and your ability to think and to feel to a place of knowing that your learned language cannot articulate. It takes you to a place where language doesn't reside. It lifts you and you go beyond thought, mind, emotions, feelings to something that is beyond words. I'm reminded of this when I think about this idea. I'm reminded of Paul. You know Paul, Saul of Tarsus, who became Paul, who persecuted the church, never met Jesus in the flesh, but yet he knew Jesus. The apostle in the Hebrew scripture who wrote most of their New Testament. Paul, who cast a spell over the Western theology. Yes, he did. Which transformed the teachings of Jesus in a most profound way. We can argue whether or not his teachings are misrepresented or if he was right or wrong. But he cast a spell. And that spell still has so many folks bound today. He cast a spell. What we cannot deny is that more than any other people that knew Jesus in the flesh, as an embodied spirit, those that walked with him, talked with him, ate with him, slept with him. Paul perceived Jesus and knew him in a different space and time. I would suggest it was Paul as he weaved in and out of spirit realm, having these transcendent experiences. Sometimes what blocks us from having these transcendent experiences is that we're so fixated on the material, the object, the person, the place, the thing. We're so stuck on that we can't perceive and go beyond and transcend that. And sometimes we spend our lives stuck in the graveyard, in the cemetery, holding on to the tombstones, beating them up, still charging them with all kinds of assaults on our lives, stuck in the cemetery, trying to kill them over again. And we can't transcend. We can't transcend. Or like Mary in Scripture, when she had this epiphany and saw Jesus, she believed. She wanted to hold on to what she knew him to be. And he said, don't touch me. I haven't yet ascended. Don't hold on to that idea of me. Let that go. Let it go. If you want to transcend, you got to go above what you even thought about your past. You got to rise up and let that die. For Paul, his powerful words in Corinthians, the 2nd chapter, 12 and 2, when he wrote, quoting Paul here, he said, 14 years ago, I was taken up to heaven for a visit. And I'm reading from the, I think the TLC version. 14 years ago, I was taken up to heaven for a visit. Don't ask me whether my body was there or just my spirit, for I don't know. Only God can answer that. But anyway, there I was in paradise and heard things and so astounding that they are beyond a man's power to describe or put in words. And anyway, I'm not allowed to tell them to others. That experience is something worth bragging about. Yes, anytime you've had that, you want to tell people. But I'm not going to do it. I'm going to boast only about how weak I am and how great God is to use such a weakness for his glory. Meaning this, that wasn't a false humility. Meaning this, that transcendence takes you up and above, and you get to see in a way that you haven't seen before. You get to understand the connections, and you get to understand the fragility of your own mortal existence in a way that you cannot even comprehend without that. And you begin to understand how fragile this whole earth is and everyone in it. The connections that we make, the lineage that we come from, the fruit that we bear. You got to understand how fragile, like the wind, it can fall apart. And you begin to handle it with care. You begin to handle it as sacred. And you know that you've been given the opportunity to live in this mortal flesh for a purpose. And you don't take that for granted. And you do not at all use that transcendence or your magic to insult, to brutalize, to destroy, to kill. But you become an agent of life, and life more abundantly. Not only did Paul have this transcendent experience, Jesus certainly did on the Mount of Transfiguration when he was in the wilderness. But we can find this in the Buddha and other great religious leaders. What I'm suggesting that this kind of experience is not just relegated to those who are embodying some great religious figure or starting some great spiritual movement or guru or any kind of religious figure. It is for the ordinary, everyday person. And when we understand this and we step into that space, we know that we can tap into the power that is you, that is me, that is ours. And we can look down at this world and not feel like I'm losing it, or anxious, or angry, or troubled, because we understand that reality, what's real, is not this material existence. We have come here to transform this material existence. This is the clay we've been given to fashion. And to get angry and with it is to lose sight of who we are as embodied spirits. I'm almost finished, y'all. Getting tangled up in one's emotional energy by focusing on words is a tool of the spell. Energy comes from a place that is beyond words. Feelings are just that, feelings. We interpret them once we're cast under the spell, based on the spell. And by spell, I mean the language then replaces the articulation of the spirit. Spirit speaks, but not in a language that we understand when we are not transcended. And when we transcend and we tune into the language of the spirit, we come back to this embodied existence and we begin to speak in spirit, which is not the articulation of language. We have a lot of words. and we need words. Don't misinterpret me or misunderstand me. Books, our articulation, our reiteration, our iteration continuously is important and necessary, but we don't want to get tangled up and entrapped and further thrown into the spell by thinking that that is the way out when it's really keeping us bound, when we don't understand the spell. The area that we're focusing on for this seminar is the nature of being, as I bring this to a close, that lies between mind and emotions. That space of knowing that transcends both, while at the same time infusing them into a synchronized whole. Our intellectual intelligence, or IQ, our emotional intelligence, EQ, neither one of them can take us where we need to be or go, or help us to fully understand or access our power in this world, because they are fragmented. It is in the fusing of the two, synchronizing them within oneself, that we transcend and elevate to another way of being, to our true way of being, which is spirit, embodied in an earthly vessel. It is the momentary space or opening in one's psyche that allows for the sperm of the spirit to impregnate the soul. Let's take one more breath together. This moment of conception is life transforming and spell breaking. Sometimes it comes and is momentary, like a nanosecond. But in that nanosecond, it is enough to transform permanently one's life. One time, one moment. This transformation is an awakening to self, or a return to spirit. It opens a portal that facilitates your journey to truth. Anything short of that doesn't add up. This kind of experience can occur over many years, and they can last for, as I said, nanoseconds, or for extended period of time. What is clear is that the one who has an experience is forever changed. The change does not have to be articulated. It doesn't have to be verbalized. It doesn't have to be explained or repeated. The evidence is in one's behavior and one's ability to break free of the spell cast over them, and to cast a new spell. Because we're going to live under a spell. As Paul came into to that Roman Greco world, a Jew under a spell, and he broke the one he was under, cast a new one. The power of the spell. This kind of experience may come while one is in meditation, but meditation is not necessary or a precursor to have this kind of experience. What is necessary is for one to submit or to live in obedience to spirit in one's soul. What is soul? We shared soul is the personal manifestation of spirit in one's being. The personal manifestation of spirit in one's being. So obedience or submitting to spirit in one's soul. What did we say spirit is? You remember. I've been sharing this since the first lesson. The essence of life that is embodied in every living being, but not limited to this spirit world, to this material world. Let me say that again. The essence of life that is embodied in every living being, but not limited to this material world. It shows up in this material world, but it transcends the material world. One's mind and emotions are expressed through one's body as behavior. Spiritual intelligence is one's ability to access spirit through the portal of one's soul, integrating mind and emotions by discerning one's inner truth, informing reality outside of the spell that we've been cast under. As we close today and these series of lessons, let me share this with you. In a world filled with chaos, spiritual intelligence is like fog lights as you're moving through a storm. In a world where truth seems to be of no importance, and facts are obscured and appear like free-floating puzzle pieces from 1,000 jigsaw puzzles, spiritual intelligence allows you to put the pieces together to make sense of the nonsensical. In a world where reality is subjective, and what it means to be a human being has become fleeting, like a moving target. Spiritual intelligence brings us back to what is real. It plants our feet firmly on solid ground. It ushers us into that space where truth abides, and to what and where eternity is all there is. Ashe and Amen. I thank you for taking this journey with me over the last 3 weeks, now the 4th week. It's my heart desire that this series of lessons has touched not your ears merely, but has touched that place in the portal of spirit where you're able to discern and transcend and be all that you are, and to realize in this life the power that resides on the inside of you, and glimpse the God, the goddess that dwells within you, that dwells within every part of this beautiful universe, and to know that all is well. Love abides. Love can never die. Love is what is truth, and truth is love. Until next time, blessings to you. Happy holidays as we move through this month, and I'll see you after the holidays with our next series.